As we find ourselves in the year 2024, one might ask, what is happening in Afghanistan right now? The current scenario in Afghanistan is a complex tapestry of conflict and instability. This land, rich in history and culture, bears the scars of decades of strife. The most recent chapter in this saga is the swift takeover by the Taliban, an event that sent shockwaves reverberating around the globe. This rapid shift in power was met with a range of responses, from shock and fear to, disturbingly, celebration in certain corners of the internet. The Taliban's ascension has created a state of uncertainty, with the international community on edge, waiting to see the long-term implications of this change in control. The Taliban's rule has historically been marked by strict interpretation of religious law and restriction of civil liberties, particularly for women. This has led to concerns about the potential erosion of rights and freedoms under their renewed reign. The reactions to the Taliban's takeover are as diverse as they are revealing. From the far-right extremists cheering on the Taliban as a symbol of defiance against global systems, to the fearful citizens of Afghanistan desperately trying to flee the country, the situation is fraught with tension. These recent events have put a spotlight on Afghanistan, a country so often associated with danger and conflict. This situation brings to light the question, why is Afghanistan so dangerous? To understand the present, we must delve into the past. The genesis of conflict in Afghanistan can be traced back to the dramatic year of 1979, when the Soviet Union launched an invasion. This was a significant move on the global chessboard, one that set the stage for decades of upheaval and strife. The Soviets sought to bolster a friendly communist government teetering on the brink of collapse. However, the invasion ignited a fierce resistance movement composed of various Afghan factions collectively known as the Mujahideen. This was a war of attrition, a war of ideology, and a war of national pride. Now here's where the plot thickens. The United States, locked in the icy grip of the Cold War with the Soviet Union, saw an opportunity to deal a blow to its adversary. It began supplying arms and funding to the Mujahideen, indirectly entering the battlefield. This was the era of proxy wars, where superpowers clashed not on their own soil but in distant lands. And from the ashes of this brutal conflict, a new group emerged, the Taliban. Born out of the chaos and lawlessness that followed the Soviet withdrawal, the Taliban swiftly rose to power. They promised stability, but their rule was marked by harsh interpretation of Islamic law, suppression of women's rights, and a complete disregard for human rights. The Soviets, worn out by the cost of war, both in terms of lives and resources, decided to withdraw in 1989. They left behind a country scarred by war, a power vacuum, and a well-armed, well-trained group of Mujahideen fighters. This moment, the Soviet withdrawal, marked the beginning of Afghanistan's descent into a state of perpetual conflict. The terror attacks of September 11, 2001 shifted the world's attention towards Afghanistan. Suddenly, this seemingly remote, landlocked country became the focal point of a global campaign against terrorism. The United States, backed by international allies, launched an invasion with the primary goal of dismantling al-Qaeda and ousting the Taliban regime that harbored them. In a matter of weeks, the Taliban's grip on the country crumbled. The swift military action was followed by efforts to rebuild Afghanistan into a democratic nation. A new government was formed, schools were built, and for the first time in a long time, there was a glimmer of hope. However, the nation-building project proved to be a Herculean task. Corruption seeped into the core of the new government, eroding trust and stunting progress. The lack of effective governance and widespread corruption left many Afghans feeling disenfranchised, creating fertile ground for insurgency. The Taliban, though toppled, were not entirely defeated. They retreated to the rural areas, regrouped, and began a bloody insurgency that would rage on for nearly 2 decades. The foreign troops found themselves caught in a quagmire, fighting an elusive enemy on unfamiliar terrain. As years turned into a decade and then another, war fatigue set in. Foreign troops began to withdraw, leaving behind a fragile Afghan government and a reinvigorated Taliban. The withdrawal, particularly the U.S. pullout in 2021, was met with a swift and aggressive resurgence of the Taliban. In mere weeks, they swept across provinces, seizing control of cities and towns. The Afghan government, bereft of foreign military support, crumbled. The capital city of Kabul fell, marking the end of 2 decades of foreign intervention and the beginning of another era of Taliban rule. The pullout of troops in 2021 paved the way for the Taliban's swift return to power, once again plunging Afghanistan into uncertainty. The aftermath of the war on terror leaves Afghanistan in a precarious state, a stark reminder of the complexities of international conflicts and the profound costs of war. From this historical overview, we can draw some conclusions about why Afghanistan is so dangerous. The roots of danger in Afghanistan are multifaceted, intertwined with decades of conflict, political instability, and the rise and fall of the Taliban. Firstly, the country has been scarred by years of war, from the Soviet invasion in the late 20th century to the recent conflicts involving the United States and its allies. These wars have left a legacy of destruction and have fostered a culture of violence. They've displaced millions, leading to a humanitarian crisis that only exacerbates the instability. Secondly, the harsh rule of the Taliban has played a significant role in shaping Afghanistan's dangerous landscape. The Taliban's strict interpretation of Islamic law during their reign in the 90s and their resurgence in recent years have led to a suppression of basic rights, especially for women and minorities. This has created a society marked by fear and oppression, where dissent is met with brutal force. Thirdly, the challenges of nation-building in a war-torn country cannot be overstated. Efforts to establish a democratic government have been met with resistance, corruption, and a lack of infrastructure. This has left a power vacuum that groups like the Taliban can exploit, leading to a cycle of instability and violence. Lastly, the rapid resurgence of the Taliban following the withdrawal of foreign troops is a stark reminder of Afghanistan's fragility. This not only represents a threat to the Afghan people but also poses potential threats to global security. The country could become a breeding ground for extremist groups, and its instability could spill over into neighboring regions. As we move forward, it is crucial to keep in mind the lessons from Afghanistan's past as we grapple with the challenges of its present and future.